One of the most famous battles in the history of America is the Little Bighorn. There have been numerous movies made about it from Hollywood. They died with their boots on with Errol Flynn. More recently, Son of the Morning Star. It is a battle that continues to be examined throughout history. Robert Nightengale joins me now. He has written a new book called The Mystery of Sitting Bull. Robert, welcome to the show. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be on.
What happened to the 7th Cavalry 140 years, 7 months ago today has been examined and re-examined throughout history. Let me see if I can set what I think most people have in their minds as how the Little Bighorn happened, at least the way that Hollywood has told us the story. Custer went into the Black Hills on a mission to find the Indians and attack them. He stumbled on the village, surprised them, discovered that he had set off an angry hornet's nest, and only through hugely superior numbers were he and his troops massacred at the Little Bighorn. Is that pretty much the story that has been handed down from Hollywood?
Well, sort of. First of all, it happened in Montana. Custer explored the Black Hills in 1874, and that was more or less the prelude to the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Mm-hmm. It was guaranteed to the Sioux Indians by the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868. Custer no sooner got into the Black Hills and one of his favorite scouts, Charlie Reynolds, was sent with the message that gold had been discovered, and suddenly, practically in the blink of an eye, the Black Hills were gone from the Sioux lands, and Sitting Bull was able to use that to rally. There was 12 Indian agencies along the Missouri River, mm-hmm. and he was able to use that to rally somewhere between, my estimates are, from the original map, and this is kind of one of the main premises of my book.
Right.
From the original map in 1876, it looks like there was anywhere between 5,000 and 7,000 Indians from the number of wickiups and teepees. In 1879, a court of inquiry was held into the Battle of the Little Bighorn concerning Major Reno's conduct. He was the second in command.
Right.
And they use a printed map. And I don't believe these errors were made deliberate. I think, there's a Sergeant Becker listed on the second map. But there was very significant changes made between the first map and the second map. And and let me say that the first map was drawn on the battlefield 2 days after the Battle of the Little Bighorn.
That's the one that was drawn by the engineering officer, Lieutenant Edward McGuire.
Yes, it was Lieutenant Edward McGuire. Yes, it was. Odometer chart, prismatic compass. He was following the trails. I mean, it was 2 days after the battle. They were still burying the bodies, and so on. And so. Removed from the second map, most significantly, and this was originally told to me by a Cheyenne Indian who had told me that Little Bighorn, you white people have it all wrong. It was an ambush.
Right.
We've always got it wrong, believe me. But and he began talking to me about their lore and the Cheyenne Indians. By the way, Custer was an adopted member of their tribe.
Right.
And and you're familiar with that story.
Yes.
And so there's some other stories that they've told me that I really don't feel free to reveal. They're kind of mystical stories that relate to them. But
sure. What
he did say was that it was a well-planned ambush, and he actually pointed down to the river. And I was on the battlefield at the time, and so I went back to the original map, and I took what he said, and I started looking in this grove of trees that is next to the river. Mm-hmm. It's about a mile long and about a quarter of a mile wide. Intermingled with those trees are teepee symbols, one into the other. And that sort of began unraveling this for me. I had written a first book. It's titled Little Bighorn, and it kind of followed the traditional white man's view that Custer couldn't have goofed it up, or the cavalry couldn't have goofed it up, and somebody had to make a mistake. And Major Reno possibly could have fought the battle better, and it was the inquiry in 1879. They were looking for a scapegoat, and so they pointed their finger at him.
Sure.
The 7th Cavalry numbered about 675 soldiers and scouts, and outnumbered 10-1. And if you look at the original map, the main Indian camp is located between two ravines. It does not follow the river the way that a usual Indian camp would. They'd have camp circles along the river. And by the way, this is, if you pick up your typical book or magazine article about the Battle of the Little Bighorn, that's the way they will show the map.
Yeah, and it's curious that this is a map, and we're talking with Robert Nightengale, who's the author of a new book, The Mystery of Sitting Bull. This is a map that has pretty much been forgotten and lost to history, never referenced by the authors or the historians. And it's curious to me because the story, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, is that Custer just sort of stumbled on this huge force of superior numbers, and your contention is that this is actually a well-planned ambush by Sitting Bull.
Absolutely. And let me say this, my background is in journalism, as yours is, and we understand who, what, where, when, why, and and our journalist teachers will tell us, you're not the story is the story, go out and get those quotes.
Right.
Well, my new book is 700 pages long, and I have 1,200 primary sources quoted in it, and I've tried to use the original sources to tell the story. And I cannot understand, this is not the map is the most glaring discrepancy, but Sitting Bull himself has kind of been lost to history. Books will say Crazy Horse was the great Indian leader at that battle. The original Indian sources do not say that at all. They say that it was Sitting Bull. And Sitting Bull was with the Hunkpapa tribes, which were in the Yellowstone River region. The Oglala, which Crazy Horse was part of, is actually quite a bit further south. And they rode north to join Sitting Bull. Arapaho, Kiowa rode north to join Sitting Bull. And all the Sioux tribes were there. And this was a calling by Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull called it the big fight. And amongst my journeys here, my research journeys, I found an article in the Toronto Globe. I believe this is 1881, 82, where they interviewed Sitting Bull just before he left Canada and came back to the United States.
Right.
He talked about messages exchanged between himself and Custer.
Really?
And absolutely. And it finally ended up, Sitting Bull was trying to talk peace, which was basically leave us alone.
Right.
And the forces, again, Custer was a lieutenant colonel of a cavalry regiment. He was not the one who set Indian policy and so on and so forth.
Sure.
Well, in the spring of 1876, the Indians were literally starved off the Indian agencies. Standing Rock, I believe they documented 1,500 warriors alone left Standing Rock agency.
And that was in large measure due to the corruption of the Indian agents?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and at the time they called it the Great Sioux War of 1876, and it really should be called the Great Indian Agents War of 1876.
Yeah, because that was the genesis of it. Yeah. How about Robert? How about this lost message, the last desperate message from Custer sent from the battlefield?
It was sent from Last Stand Hill, and very interestingly, again, an author by the name of Colonel Graham, and he's a fairly respected author. He put a lot of primary documents in his book, and he sort of referenced this, and he kind of sneered at it. Has a Hollywood touch. Well, the Battle of the Little Bighorn has a Hollywood touch.
You bet.
Yeah, certainly it does, and it's part of our mythology, kind of our history and so on and so forth.
Sure.
But I didn't, I had taken note of it at the time, and somehow I stumbled across a Wild West magazine in the 1960s called Custer's Last Message. Well, traditionally it's a last message that was addressed to Captain Benteen, which was hurry forward, bring packs,
right.
Type. Okay, right. And you're familiar with that.
Yes.
Well, this is a totally different message. It's I'm surrounded, I'm on a hill, I've only got 40 men left, I can't hold out another minute, send help. So what we did was we used a computer to analyze that handwriting with Custer's known handwriting.
Right.
And at least in our opinion, it's a perfect match. I challenge anybody to go up there. I mean, this is a controversial historical subject. There's bound to be opinions.
Sure.
But I did write a report on this on Custer's last message. I wrote a report on Sitting Bull's ambush in the Little Bighorn Valley, where I noted all these Indian positions.
Right.
And last but not least, and this is going to not make me any new friends with the national park, but a historical site. They put over $1 million into it. It's called Deep Ravine, and it's where 28 soldiers ended up in this ravine as they were being wiped out on the Custer battlefield. He had a little over 200 soldiers, and the battlefield is actually quite extensive when you get out there. And in one part of it, apparently these soldiers were attempting to escape, ended up in this ravine, and were all killed, and they were buried in that spot. Well, a couple of years ago, I say a couple of years ago, it may have been 12 or 15, they did some research in what they call Deep Ravine, couldn't find anything, so on and so forth. Well, and again, this was just something that I stumbled across. As I'm looking at these maps, and I said, wait a minute, these ravines don't match up, what they have on the battlefield, but what's on the original map.
So it's actually marked in the wrong location.
It's marked in the wrong location. They've got a couple $1 million into this trail to nowhere, and our tax dollars and brilliant government at work.
Well, it's a fascinating story, Robert. The book is called The Mystery of Sitting Bull, and I think one of the overriding messages that comes from it is that Sitting Bull, through the mists of time and history, has not gotten the credit that he deserved for being a pretty good military tactician. The book is a book available on Amazon and places like that, Robert?
It's available on our website at this time. That's The Mystery of Sitting Bull. Also have those reports that I spoke about.
Right.
And again, this is a controversial subject, but I have tried to use sound research and journalistic techniques, and there's a lot more to this story. I mean, I've given talks where Custer was crazy. Everybody knows that, and I'll say, okay, I'll grant you that. Now, was Tom Custer crazy? And, right away, well, who was Tom Custer? Well, it was one of 3 Custer brothers that died on Last Stand Hill.
Yeah, with him.
Tom Custer enlisted in the Civil War as a private, ended up as a lieutenant colonel, and is one of 2 men in United States history to win the Medal of Honor twice.
Wow. Now,
was Tom Custer crazy? And at that point, people start to realize that maybe some of these stereotypical kind of, and Custer, by the way, was in deep trouble before the Battle of the Little Bighorn with President Grant. He had been subpoenaed to Washington. Testified. The Secretary of War, Belknap, had to resign. A few months before that, the Secretary of the Interior had to resign.
Yeah,
all
over these
all
of these over these corruption charges. Robert, I've got to run, but it's a fascinating book and it's a fascinating topic, and it's always interesting when we learn new information about it. The book is called The Mystery of Sitting Bull. It's available at that website, mysteryofsittingbull.com. Thanks for all the work you've done on this, Robert, and thanks for taking time to talk to us about it today.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. Hope you have a good evening, sir. 21 after 5 here on the Bobby Mack Show. When we come back, I will catch up with a couple of stories that I teased earlier and have not had an opportunity to get to.